Hello, it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. In our Facebook group, the Karen Burniston Pop-up Peeps, Michelle made a request. She wanted to see the Parcel Pop-up die set decorated as a present with a sliding lid. So I made a Gatefold card with an extra flap at the bottom that animates the Parcel Pop-up, attached the lid to the sliding rectangle that reveals two little reindeer as the card opens. Okay, so before I get to the pop-up, I need to first make the card itself. So I'm going to use our flap enclosure die set. I want to make a 5x5 card when it's closed. So what I started with is a piece of cardstock, 7.5 inches by 5 inches, and then I scored that cardstock at 1.25 inches from each side. That leaves me a 5x5 square in the middle that I added a piece of pattern paper to, just a little bit smaller than the square. Then from the same color cardstock as my base piece, I cut 3 flaps from the flap enclosure die set. For the bottom flap, I'm going to attach it in the usual manner. So that means finding the fold line, folding it, adding some adhesive, and then attaching that tab up behind the card so that the flap is along the bottom edge. The flap enclosure die set includes a decorative piece that fits on the flap, and I can go ahead and decorate the inside part of that flap. For the side flaps, I'm not going to fold on the score line. Instead, the score line is just going to go right along the edge of the card. So that way those flaps will extend further into the center and actually overlap each other. And then I just repeat that same process for the other side and the last flap. So when you want to extend the reach of the flap, you just need to leave pieces of cardstock attached to your base card. However wide those pieces are is how far you'll move the flaps towards the center. I want to get decorator pieces on the front of the card, so the outside of the flap, before I add the closure. And for that, I'm just using the decorator die that comes in the flap enclosure die set. And then for the extra part of the rectangle, I just used pattern paper that I cut on my trimmer. So my initial thought was to leave a gap between those two pieces that I would cover with ribbon. But then I changed my mind and decided for the front of the card, I actually wanted to make that stripe kind of disappear. So since I used striped paper, I just used a piece of the same paper and lined up the stripes. So for the right side of the flap, that's where I'm going to attach my decorative button. And I'm sewing that on through the flap by just piercing a couple holes and just using some thin elastic thread to tie the button on. For the left side flap, I'm using a clear button that has 4 holes. And I have it most of the way sewn on, but I'm going to leave a loop on the front of the card. And on that loop, I want to slide a little bead onto the elastic before I go down through my final hole of my button and into the inside of the flap. And then I'm going to test and make sure that loop is the right size to stretch across to my decorative button before I tie off the elastic on the inside of the card and then just cut away the excess. Now that my closure is complete, I can decorate the inside of the card flaps, and for those I'm using those same decorative pieces from the flap enclosure set, the rectangles I cut with my trimmer, and then those ribbon pieces that I had intended to use all the way around the card, but in the end wanted to use just on the interior. Since I am using striped paper, I took a little care when cutting decorative pieces that the patterns lined up. I just thought that was fun. So that's a fun card technique, even if you don't plan to put a pop-up inside, but we do want to put a pop-up inside, so let's switch to the Parcel Pop-up die set. Now, if you want to watch the pieces being die cut, you'll want to go watch the full assembly video for the Parcel Pop-up. I've gone ahead and done the die cutting. I'm going to remove that little piece of cardstock from my pop-up that I don't need. And I wanted to address something in this video that's not in the assembly video, and that is a little bit of some extra help with this area right here where the tabs are. So this little section right here, it lifts up as the slider arm comes up, and then it lowers back down as the slider arm goes down. And in the course of making that, you have to get those little notches stretched across and into the other notches. Some people have reported that they tend to tear them when they try to do that. So I'm going to teach this trick, which is just to take a scrap piece of cardstock over that section of the die and cut it again. And then trim it out so that you have just that little area that kind of looks like a bread clip. So you glue that section right over the top of the matching section on the base pop-up, and that will make that section very strong. So it will do a couple things. Number one is it helps it lower easier. So if you've ever had one where your materials seem kind of light and you kind of have to push it to get it back down, that's probably the area that needs doubling. And then the other thing is because you've doubled the tabs themselves, we'll be able to actually bend them out of the way and into the other notches, and you won't have to do the stretch thing. Okay, switching to my slider arm, I want to work the side folds. So there's this fold here and then one along the long section. So those are both reinforcing tabs that get glued down, but not yet. And then once it's in this position, you want to find the two folds that are above and below the wider section. Those get accordion folded. So you have a mountain at the top, valley on the second one. Then here on the back, whoops, I want to glue down the little reinforcing side tab for that upper section. So I'm not going to do the long reinforcing tab, but I am going to glue down the short one. And I'll just clip that to let the glue set up. Okay, so here's that little doubled up tab section, and normally you would do a stretch thing, but this time, since we've doubled it, we can actually fold over the tab. So see, I've just folded it over to make it where I can get the slider arm into that section and then unfold it. So I probably wouldn't do that trick if I was using just a single layer of cardstock, because I think it'll make that tab too weak. But with it doubled, it works. So here's the notches that need to go in that section. So this piece comes up through, and then on the left side, I can just wiggle the notch into the notch. And then on the right side, I can now take my folded tab, pinch it, and bring it around, and then unfold it. So that should be a little easier than doing it where you have to stretch the entire tab around. Okay, so now the slider arm is attached at the notches, and then I can accordion fold that down. So the mountain fold and the valley fold make it look like an accordion, and it gets down into that flat position. Now on the red pop-up piece, there are folds at either end of those thin little sections, and I work the back ones as valleys and the front ones as mountains, and that will basically collapse down that pop-up box in such a position that on the back of the piece, the little small tab that's out on the end is now in line with our slider arm. So keeping everything nice and flat is the best way to do this, and I'm going to coat the inside with adhesive. I'm using my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle, and we do sell both of those items on our website. A quick check that everything looks straight, and then I flatten everything down, fold the red tab over and into the adhesive. And then when I close up the green piece, it will trap that red tab in between the layers. Okay, so that pop-up mechanism is mostly done. I just have one fold left, and it's right here at the base of the box, and that would be a mountain fold. Okay, so taking a look at this from the side, you can kind of see how it's going to operate once it's against a card. Then the motion of opening the card will cause that slider arm to come up and out of the box. And then what I want to do then is just add the rectangle that comes in the set is designed to attach to the slider arm. You actually line it up on the top edge, and then you just want to make sure that the tail of the rectangle is down inside the box as it closes. Okay, so here's how that operates, and then I want to do some decorating of it before I install it inside the card. So in the Parcel Pop-up set, there is a big square. I've die cut that out of that same red cardstock, as well as the piece that can be used as either a lid or a flap when you're doing the cardboard box look. Also in the set is a stitched decorator square and a stitched decorator flap, and both of those I've cut out of a red polka dot paper. And what I'm doing with the square is decorating it like a present by using the signpost die that's in the set. So that kind of has a fun little wood grain texture on it. And I've cut it 4 times and used it as ribbons, and then cover the seam in the middle with the little heart that comes in the set. And then rather than cut off the excess, I decided to fold it to the back and glue it down. And now I have my little decorator present. It's a little bit smaller than the red square, so then I can just glue both pieces together. Okay, and then for the lid of my present, I would like to make sure that I place my decorator cardstock that's acting as a ribbon in the same spot so that it lines up with the present when it's closed. So then I just use that as a guide and do the same thing with wrapping the ends of the cardstock to the back and then gluing it onto my red present lid. The Parcel Pop-up set includes a nice big bow for when you're decorating it as a present, so I'm going to glue that up at the top of the lid. Okay, adhesive all over the front of the pop-up, and then I'm going to place that present to it. And I do like to just have a little bit of extra room along the fold at the bottom. So I don't bring the present all the way down to the fold, but actually leave just a little bit showing. That gives it some room to fold down in the finished card. And then along the back here, I've got this little seam. That's a great spot for a piece of just regular old Scotch tape. That will make sure that that can't become a catch point, in my case for my little reindeer's feet, to come down and possibly catch against that ledge. I've cut a piece of cardstock to 2 1/4 by 3 3/8, and that will be perfect for sliding up and down inside the box and holding the lid. So I will attach my lid to my cardstock that's going to slide up and out of the box. So I'll just use the tab that's attached to the lid. Now the lid is wider than my piece of cardstock, so with the little leftover pieces of tab, I'll just cut them at an angle. And then I can put anything on that rectangle to slide up and out of the box, and I have chosen our Christmas animals die set and cut and decorated 2 reindeer. And then for placement, I'm putting them so that their antlers are right up next to the fold at the top, and then their bodies stay within the limits of the rectangle itself so that I know that they can slide down into the box and not get caught up anywhere. Now, even though I have tape inside the box at that potential catch point, I have a lot of feet here that could potentially catch. So I decided just to tape them down since the feet actually aren't going to raise high enough to come up and out of the box. Okay, so I slid the rectangle down into the box, and now I'm going to attach the pop-up to the card. So adhesive on the base, this is just usual Parcel Pop-up assembly. I want the ends of the pop-up right in the fold of the card. They can go anywhere along the fold, but today I am just centering it. So just giving that a second to set up, and I can see where that's going to be. That looks good. Okay, keeping everything flat, now I want to add the adhesive to attach the other half of the pop-up. And one thing that I want to make sure is that I'm only using adhesive on that back red piece and only on the sides like you see me doing here. So nothing in the middle where the slider arm needs to go up and down. Then I close the card against that exposed adhesive and give it a second to set up. Now remember, my lid and rectangle isn't completely attached inside there, so as I open it, it's just going to kind of fall out of there. What I need now to do is add the adhesive to that green slider rectangle part, and then I think it's easiest to get the rectangle all the way down into the box and then close it up, and then give it a good press so that it will attach to that green slider in the right position. Okay, so the pop-up is working nicely, and all I need to do to finish out this card is add some decorations. The swoopy vines from the Flowers and Bees set can be arranged in a circle and they make a pretty wreath. And if you'd like that wreath to look a little bit more like holly, you can do that with just a standard hole punch. So a regular office hole punch, and I just take a little divot out of both sides of a leaf, and then that makes it look a little bit more like holly. And I will sometimes stack a couple vines on top of each other and punch through both layers because that makes it go a little bit faster. And obviously optional, I just think it's kind of a fun adaptation to turn that vine into a sprig of holly. You can experiment with different angles between the vines as you glue them together, and that will increase or decrease the size of the finished wreath. What I did is I just made 2 sets of 4, kind of in a rectangle shape like this, and then I turn one 90 degrees and glue it over the other one. I actually made 2 of the wreaths so I could put one on the front of the card, and I'm using pop dots since one side has to go over the top of that clear button. There's that big bow in the Parcel Pop-up die set that works great on the wreaths, and then for hollyberries I just used red enamel dots. There is a tag die included in the Parcel Pop-up, and I dug through my stash to find a greeting stamp that would fit on that tag and stamped it on both sides. Then I attached the tag using a jump ring to the elastic. And then a couple more of those little holly sprigs that I made on the right-hand side with some holly berries. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up this card and look at the interior decorations. The left side features another one of those wreaths. And then I kind of mimicked that look on the right side using our crosshatch circles as a place to write a personal greeting. For an inside greeting, I went with Merry Christmas. It's one of our big script dies. I cut it out of white glitter paper, but then also out of red cardstock and glued them over the top of each other, just since that S was going to be suspended out over the air. I wanted to make sure that it was plenty strong. The finished card measures 5x5 square when closed. So that fits in an A7 envelope for mailing, but because of the bulk of the decorative button and the bead, it would need the extra postage. If you swapped those out for something lower profile, then you wouldn't have to worry about the extra postage at all. So you can imagine this card being done in other occasions. You know, you could decorate that present as a birthday present. It's basically just a little surprise. Whatever is going to come up and out of the box makes a lovely display piece as well. The description box below this YouTube video is where you will find supply links as well as a link to the blog post. And on that blog post are pictures of this card as well as all of the cards made by our very talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com where you can find out information about purchasing these dies as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.